We continue our study in the Gospel of John. Today we are looking at John 11, 1 through 16. The chapter of John 11 is the story of the raising of Lazarus, and 11, 1 through 16 sets up this story. Today I am calling this message Courgeous Thomas. 11, beginning in verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed there where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" "Aren't there 12 hours in a day?" Jesus answered. "If anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he does stumble because the light is not in him." He said this, and then he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm on my way to wake him up." Then the disciples said to him, "Well, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he will get well." Jesus, however, was speaking about his death. They thought he was speaking about a natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us go, that we may die with him." First of all, let's kind of look at the timing of this. At the end of chapter 10, Jesus was across the Jordan at Perea, which is about a day's journey from Bethany. He lingers 2 days, and then he travels on the 3rd day to Bethany. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days when Jesus arrives. Do the math. When the messengers arrive and find Jesus, Lazarus has already been dead for a day. Why 4 days? There's a lot of speculation on that one. One of the things I've heard that I have not been able to find the source on was that there was a Jewish belief that the spirit hung around for 3 days after someone died before moving on to its eternal resting place. We don't know if Jesus was waiting for the largest audience to do this for. Bethany's not too far from Jerusalem. Lazarus was a popular person. Did he do this to maximize his crowd? There's lots of theories. We really don't know why he waited in this situation. But we do know the why. Jesus is quite plain about this. Verse 4, when he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." And then what he said to his disciples in 15, "I am glad for you I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." God is in the business of glorifying himself to draw all people to him. I cannot say that enough. I cannot say that enough. You read it, that theme, that thread runs through the whole Bible. God is in the business of glorifying himself to draw all people to him. And God can use any situation, any circumstance in our lives to do that if we believe and trust in him. This doesn't mean that the situation will be worked out how we think it should be worked out. Let's face it, We are selfish, flawed beings. Our definition of good and right is based on our human nature. Kind of like if you asked a 3-year-old, what do you want for breakfast? And they said ice cream. Well, their nature is based on being 3 years old. What it means is that God will work this out in a manner that will glorify Him. God is always in the business of glorifying Himself. Let's look at this phrase that Jesus talks about, the 12 hours of light, starting in verse 9. Aren't there 12 hours in a day? Jesus answered. If anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks during the night, he does stumble because the light is not in him. There's probably a proverb running around at this point in time that says, if you walk during the day, you don't stumble. And realize that at night, this is like super dark around this place unless you happen to be carrying around a candle or a lamp with you. There's no street lights. There's no car lights. There's nothing. It's dark. Basically, what I think he is saying in this is, if you're careful when you go, you can see the hazards. If you walk in the light during the day, you don't stumble. But he goes farther than that. He says he sees the light of the world. If anyone walks during the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. Well, what I think he's saying here is that if you follow God's will, you have nothing to fear. It is when we step out of God's will in darkness, we are stepping out in our own power, in our own direction, not in the power of God, and we will stumble. I think every one of us, I know I sure do, have experienced that in our lives where we've said, oh, okay, I'm going this way, God. I'll see you later. Doesn't work out so well. Last point I want to make on this one is Thomas. And we give Thomas a lot of grief. We call him Doubting Thomas. I'm really not going to go into all that here. I just want to point out that it is Thomas who is the brave one. Let us go and die with him. Thomas says, I am willing to follow Jesus regardless of the cost. Even if it costs my life, I will follow him. If you ever want some inspiration like that, go to Voice of the Martyrs. Read some of the stories there about people in our world today willing to endure beatings, separation from family, loss of home and material possessions for the sake of the gospel. Jesus endured everything for us. The heartbreak of being deserted by friends, the Roman scourging, the brutal crucifixion. What are we willing to sacrifice for him who gave all for us? What did Thomas say? Let us go and die with him. Death looked very certain for Jesus if he returned, and Thomas was willing to take that risk. Are we? Are we willing to stand for Jesus in the face of someone pointing a gun to our head or the head of a loved one? I'm convicted by this. I would love to say, of course I would stand for you, Jesus. But would I? Would you? What are your limits for following God? I will follow you, God, unless you tell me to leave my comfortable suburban home with a Lexus in the driveway and a swimming pool in the backyard. I'll follow you until I have to give more than 10% of my income. I'll follow you unless you ask me for more than 2 hours a week of my time. How far are you willing to follow Jesus? What did Jesus say? No one who puts his hand on the plow and looks back to the things behind is fit for the kingdom of God. And also, anyone who loses his life because of me will find it. Let us go and die with him.